The ultrasound photo fluttered like a lost leaf when Lydia Hale stepped into the ballroom lights and saw her husband's hand cradle another woman's waist. Cameras flashed. 1,000 whispers rose like wind against glass. "Nathan," she said, voice steady, palms trembling against her belly. Her husband, New York's favorite self-made millionaire, didn't move. The woman in the crimson silk dress tilted her chin and smiled. "We were just leaving," she told the press, loud enough to carry. Lydia's vision narrowed to a tunnel, to the pearly gift box on the charity table, a white ribbon tied like a promise. She had brought it for luck. Instead, the ribbon cut her fingers. She folded the ultrasound back into her clutch, turned away, and vanished. The Park Regent's ballroom smelled like warm vanilla and money. Chandeliers glittered over a maze of silver chafers, donors with summer tans, and waiters practicing invisibility. The Hale Foundation's annual Night of Foundations drew judges, influencers, and the kind of wealthy families whose last names could open doors or close them forever. Lydia Hale had worked for months on the event's maternal health grant line. She wasn't just the wife of Nathan Hale, founder of Arc-Bright Systems. She was the architect behind the initiative that would underwrite prenatal clinics across the tri-state. In her mind, it was simple. You give mothers dignity, and everything else, jobs, education, safer neighborhoods, has a chance. But simple things rarely survive a room like this. Nathan was late, and Lydia's lower back ached the way it did on long days. 7 months along. The doctor had told her to rest. Rest is a rumor for a woman who knows the life in her belly is counting on her to keep moving. She kept checking the entrance, fearing and then finally seeing him. Nathan in classic black, shoulders squared, hair a little longer than before. He wasn't alone. The woman beside him was a problem you couldn't unsee. Sloane Mercer, Arc-Bright's sharp-jawed COO, whose efficiency had saved the company twice in the early days, and whose eyes always seemed to be measuring what you cost. Cameras recognized it before Lydia could name it. Not a rumor, not a strategic pairing for optics. An intimacy that made people look away. Sloane touched Nathan's wrist like she owned the courtesies of his body, and a photographer caught it. The quiet, damning touch that can ruin a decade. "Mrs. Hale," said a reporter with a mic made of false empathy. "How does it feel to see your husband arrive with Ms. Mercer?" "Excuse me," Lydia said softly. She touched the white ribbon on the gift box she'd placed at the charity table. Inside was a simple card, hand-lettered, for safe beginnings. She had thought of opening the gala with it, a symbol and a story, the first portable Doppler for a Queen's clinic. All she could do now was make it through the night without outlawing her own heart. She intercepted Nathan near the bar. "We were supposed to walk in together," she said, forcing a smile that felt like splinters. "I texted," he said, eyes searching her face, and then skittering away. Sloane appeared at his shoulder like a closing door. "We were pulled into a donor huddle," she said. "Unplanned. Like life," Lydia said. "And babies." For an instant, something flared behind Sloane's poise. An old bruise, or a calculation misfiring. Then a photographer called Nathan's name, and Sloane turned, offering that camera-ready half-smile. Lydia stepped back. "You don't wrestle on marble floors." Speeches began. She made hers, short, clean, focused on the clinics. While she spoke, Lydia scanned the front table. Sloane sat in the seat that was supposed to be Lydia's when she'd planned the run of show months ago. Nathan's phone lit the underside of his jaw. When the applause died, he clapped late. At the end of the night, Lydia found a quiet corner near the service exit, pressed a palm under the weight of her belly, and let 2 tears escape. She wasn't fragile. She was furious at how the world asks women to forgive before anyone admits a wound. Her phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. Your husband moved money. Ask about Resilience Fund too. Don't confront him tonight. And don't open the white box. Lydia stared at the ribbon she had tied herself. It lay on the table where donors had left their envelopes. The note wasn't possible, but here it was. She took a breath, snapped a photo of the text, and tucked the phone away. Moments later, when the clatter of breakdown filled the ballroom, Lydia eased the box into her tote bag, walked out under the sleeping chandeliers, and made a decision that would change the trajectory of a dozen lives. She didn't go home. She disappeared. The night train from Grand Central breathed like a living thing. Lydia chose it because trains carry secrets, as if they were just more passengers losing themselves in the windows. She rode to her sister's in Stamford, not trusting the driver on her usual route, not trusting anything that might report her movement. Samantha answered her door in an oversized Quinnipiac sweatshirt, hair in a top knot, face scrubbed clean. "What happened?" she asked, pulling Lydia in. Sisters don't waste time on hello when your eyes are glassed with the reflection of a life detonating. Lydia told her almost everything. The gala, the entrance, Sloane's hand at Nathan's wrist, the text from no one. She left out the years of small compromises, the business dinners where Sloane was the one who laughed at Nathan's jokes too hard, the board retreats where Lydia had been introduced as the heart of our philanthropy, like that was a harmless demotion. She left out the nights Nathan slept in the city and came home smelling of hotel soap. Some silences are just mercy you give yourself, because pregnancy amplifies every story until it crushes the air. "You can't go back," Sam said plainly. "I'm not running," Lydia said. "I'm buying time." "Time for what?" "To see who I married," she said, "and who's trying to ruin us." Sam fetched the go bag she kept for storm evacuations. "Stay here," she said. "I'll call Dr. Kwan to switch your next appointments, and we'll call a lawyer first thing." Lydia set the white box on the kitchen island. The ribbon stared up at her. Don't open the white box. The note had told her it was dangerous. But how dangerous? Poison was melodrama. Still, her palm tingled where the ribbon had cut her earlier. "Sam," Lydia said. "Gloves." Sam stared. "You think—" "I think someone didn't want me to open it," she said, "which is exactly why I need to know what's inside." Sam handed her dish gloves with cartoon lemons on them. Lydia sliced the tape with a butter knife and eased back the lid. Tissue paper. A smaller velvet pouch tied with twine. Lydia's heart pounded. She opened the pouch. Inside, nestled like a dare, was a baby rattle carved in pale wood, etched with the words, "A gift from family." "Creepy," Sam muttered. "There's a smell," Lydia said. Faint, metallic, wrong. Not poisonous on its own. She didn't know what poison smelled like, but not just wood. The handle was sticky. Someone had brushed something onto it that didn't belong. A rash flared across her glove. Sam inhaled. "We're calling the police." "Not yet," Lydia said. "We call Dr. Kwan. If this is toxic, we need a sample properly bagged. You always were the lab partner teachers loved," Sam said. "And I always hated shortcuts." She closed the pouch, slid it back into the box, and used a clean ziplock to wrap the whole thing. "Tonight I'm resting. Tomorrow we act." They sat at Sam's small table, the cheap wood scarred with years of coffee mugs. Lydia pressed her forehead to the cool surface. She thought of the text again. "Your husband moved money. Ask about Resilience Fund too." Outside, a siren stitched through the dark. Inside, Lydia whispered, "If Sloane thinks she can take my life while I'm making one, she has no idea who I was before I married Nathan." Sam's eyes warmed. "Remind me," she said. "I was the woman who could balance a clinic budget to pennies. Lydia said. The woman who rebuilt after Dad left, who learned how to read ledgers and lies. And you're still her, Sam said. Then let's go find the ledger, Lydia replied. Sloane Mercer slid her bare feet onto the heated marble of Nathan's penthouse bathroom and watched the city braid itself into dawn. She'd slept 2 hours, not because she'd been with Nathan, he had retreated to his office to get in front of headlines, but because plans are more exhilarating than sleep. On her phone, a deck labeled Transition Framework waited for final polish. Resilience Fund 2 had been her idea, pitched to Nathan as a rainy day vehicle when regulators sniffed around their aggressive acquisitions. He called it prudent. She called it the first plank of the bridge she was building to a life no one would be able to take away again. She remembered the way poverty had made promises to her mother in Indiana, promises that bills could be paid if she smiled hard enough at the man who owned the laundromat. Sloane had studied every night by the hum of machines until she earned scholarships, internships, whatever. Ships pulled her away from that town and toward rooms where decisions were made by people who'd never smelled bleach. She didn't hate Lydia. That would have been a waste. She pitied the gentleness that mistook philanthropy for power. But pity has a short shelf life when it blocks air. Her phone buzzed. A message from T. Rattle delivered. No confirmation. You sure about this? I'm sure about everything, Sloane typed. Then deleted. Proceed as planned, and keep your face out of this. She opened a hidden notes app. The list was spare and neat. Secure board votes. Already 3. Need 2 more. Press narrative. Compassionate repositioning. Nathan exhausted. Lydia under care. Sloane stepping in to stabilize. Legal flank. Pre-draft separation statement with mutual respect. Boilerplate. Gift. Catalyst event, if required. She wasn't a monster, she told herself. She would have preferred clean lines, amicable statements, staged photos, a year of transition that didn't bruise reputations. But power hates a vacuum, and Lydia's public vanishing threatened to turn sympathy into scrutiny at exactly the wrong moment. The gift, as a narrative device, would force the board to consolidate behind Sloane for safety's sake and keep journalists out of corners that mattered. Nathan padded in, tireless, eyes bruised from a night with his conscience. Where is she? He asked. Your PR firm thinks she went to her sister's, Sloane said. They're doing soft outreach. This isn't what I wanted, he said. And for a flicker, Sloane saw the kid Nathan used to be. Brilliant, intent, terrified of being alone. It rarely is, Sloane said. But we don't get to pause. We need a statement before markets open. He rested a hand on the counter, as if trying to steady the whole floor. I never promised you any of this, he said. And I never asked for promises, Sloane replied. I asked for partnership. Nathan looked up, and in that look was the truth she'd trained herself to ignore. He didn't understand the difference. She adjusted the collar of his shirt, smoothing the fabric like a seamstress who knows the suit will be photographed. I'll draft the statement, she said. We lead with concern for Lydia's health, gratitude for privacy, and a heartfelt commitment to the Foundation's work. And you? He asked. I'm the colleague who stepped up when you needed me, she said. Nothing more, nothing less. They both recognized the lie and accepted it because it was useful. At 9 a.m., Lydia sat on the crinkly paper in Dr. Kwan's office, while rain thudded against the windows. Dr. Kwan examined her with the efficient gentleness only seen in clinicians who've delivered thousands of babies and still know each mother is one universe. You're measuring well, Dr. Kwan said. Heartbeat strong. Lydia swallowed relief like water. I have another concern. She explained the box and the rattle, the sticky film on the handle, the rash across the glove. Dr. Kwan listened without flinching. You did the right thing not touching it bare-handed. Leave it with me. I'll send it to a lab that owes me favors. No police yet. I want to be sure, Lydia said. Caution isn't cowardice, Dr. Kwan replied. She printed a new appointment schedule under the alias L. Sutter, then lowered her voice. Whatever story you're in, you're not alone. From there, Lydia and Sam drove to a co-working space in Norwalk, where the air smelled like highlighters and ambition. Lydia set up at a corner desk with a rented laptop and a stack of printouts. She had 2 ways into Arkwright's private accounts: old board packets and Nathan's habit of emailing himself notes with subject lines like, "Don't forget." He was brilliant, but his brilliance created a wake of carelessness he had always expected women to tidy. The phrase resilience fund, too, surfaced in a draft memo: liquidity reserve for strategic contingencies, seeded via discretionary philanthropy allocations, tax advantages to be explored. Another email showed transfers from the foundation to a donor-advised fund with a matching name and a shadow board of trustees, none of whom were Lydia. She circled numbers, cross-referenced dates. The pattern resolved. Money was moving in concentric circles that all led back to Sloane's hands. Not theft, something slicker. The foundation's rainy day dollars were being repositioned beyond Lydia's stewardship toward a vehicle that would let Sloane shape the company and its narrative without Lydia in the room. Sam leaned over her shoulder. Is it illegal? Maybe not, Lydia said, but it's a moral fraud, diverting power out of public view. Can you stop it? Lydia exhaled. Only if we change the story. Her phone buzzed. A new unknown number. You're being watched. He'll say he didn't mean to. He rarely does. Ask about the cabin. The cabin, Lydia typed. Who are you? No reply. She closed her eyes and saw the cabin they'd rented once near Phoenicia, with a deck like an outstretched palm and a bed built over storage drawers. Nathan had written code at that cabin for 20 hours straight, while she made soup and read out loud from a book on birth stories, both of them pretending that her longing and his hunger were the same thing. It had been their brief, bright season. If there was another cabin, she didn't know it. Wherever we start, Lydia said, we finish in a courtroom. You ready for that? Sam asked. I am if our baby needs me to be, Lydia said. And if the other mothers in those clinics need me to be. She tapped the email icon and began composing a message to an attorney, known for making the rich remember what accountability feels like. Nathan Hale had always believed that if he could solve a problem with code, he could solve it everywhere. He had made a fortune off algorithms that learned from messy data. The mess at home should have been no different. Take inputs, issue outputs, adjust. But people refuse to be data sets. He read the first draft of the PR statement Sloane had sent. In light of ongoing health considerations, the family requests privacy. The Hale Foundation's work continues uninterrupted under the steady leadership of our executive team, including COO Sloane Mercer. He deleted the word steady leadership and typed dedicated team, then deleted that and typed nothing, because every adjective felt like a lie. He called Lydia twice, straight to voicemail. Liddy, it's me. I need to see you. I need to fix this. Please call. He tried not to imagine her face when she saw that photo of him and Sloane. He tried not to remember the first time he'd crossed the thin moral wire between gratitude and taking. How quick it had been. How easily he'd told himself he was lonely. How he had believed that success atoned for confusion. Somewhere along the way, he had let Sloane become the person who knew his fears, because she made them profitable. Now Lydia was gone, and Sloane was everywhere. He met Sloane and the board in a glass conference room that made Midtown look like a scale model of itself. We're stabilizing, Sloane said briskly. Donors are spooked, but they'll follow strength. We emphasize continuity and care. What about Lydia? He asked. We respect her privacy, Sloane said. We don't weaponize the public. We also don't let a personal situation create systemic risk. Systemic risk, Nathan repeated. You mean me? I mean us, Sloane said levelly. The mission. The thousands of employees whose mortgages depend on us not making emotional decisions in a crisis. The board chair, a woman in her 70s with pearls you didn't joke about, folded her hands. Nathan, she said, a clean story saves more than a messy truth. We expect you to make one. He nodded, because nodding was what you do when $7 billion worth of market cap watches your neck move. After the meeting, he took the elevator alone to the parking garage, where the concrete made everything honest. He called the number he hadn't dialed in 5 years. Detective Ruiz? He said, when the voice answered. It's Nathan Hale. I need to know how to find someone without using a PI who'll sell it to Page 6. Ruiz sighed. You tech guys, she said. You want privacy until you want a miracle. She's my wife, he said. And she's pregnant. There was a pause long enough to age him. Text me what you have, Ruiz said at last. And Nathan? If she doesn't want you to find her, there may be a reason your money can't fix. He leaned his head against the steering wheel and understood what he'd been avoiding. He wasn't a victim of Sloane. He was a collaborator. Even if the poisoned gift wasn't his idea, he had built the house where it might feel necessary. The lab called Dr. Kwan at noon, and Dr. Kwan called Lydia immediately. It's not the kind of poison you see in movies, Dr. Kwan said, careful, measured. But there were traces of an irritant mixed with a compound that could be dangerous to a newborn with skin contact. Not lethal to you at this dose, but deeply reckless. Who would do that? Sam demanded on speaker. The world is full of people who think outcomes justify methods, Dr. Kwan said. I'm reporting it anonymously to a toxicologist I trust, off the record for now. You should keep the item and any packaging in a sealed bag as potential evidence. Lydia thanked her, hung up, and stared at the Ziploc on the table. The words, a gift from family, burned hot and wrong. Her lawyer, Ava Grady, whose voice sounded like she sharpened it on nonsense, arrived with a yellow legal pad and a calm that made Lydia feel suddenly less alone. You did right leaving the city, Ava said, after listening to the whole story. We'll file for protective orders and an injunction to freeze movement from the Foundation to any new funds without dual signatures. Can we stop Sloane? Sam asked. We can slow her, Ava said. Stopping comes from narrative and facts. We need emails, texts, board minutes, the names of anyone who saw too much and decided to look away. My husband, Lydia said. It surprised her, not because it wasn't true, but because saying it out loud felt like stepping onto a new planet. Ava didn't flinch. Would he flip? He's already falling, Lydia said quietly. But I don't know what direction. That night, Lydia slept for 3 hours, woke to her son kicking like a small drummer, and whispered to him, You're my metronome. We're going to keep time. In the city, Sloane prepped for the board's emergency alignment session, the phrase she'd chosen so no one had to say coup. She rehearsed the script. Lydia has stepped away for health. Nathan remains visionary, but needs operational guardrails. Donors require steadiness. She breathed through her nose and counted backward from 100, the trick she'd learned to keep panic from staining her voice. Then everything tilted. Her phone lit with a photo message from an unknown number. The baby rattle, gloved hands, lab bag. The caption, We see you. We'll see you in court. She typed back, fingers flashing. Who is this? No reply. She looked up at the city's dark, glossy face. The gift had been meant as leverage, not harm, a narrative push, not a crime. She had told herself that a little scare would consolidate the board without the spectacle of scandal. But the lab bag meant evidence. Evidence meant trials, headlines, and a past she had kept sealed. At 2:15 a.m., the penthouse intercom buzzed. Nathan's voice, "I'm coming up." She wiped her face, smoothed her blouse, opened the door. Nathan stepped in with rain across his shoulders and a look she recognized. The moment a person recognizes themselves. "Where is Lydia?" he asked. "I don't know," Sloane said truthfully, "but I think she knows about the fund." "So fix it," he said. "Undo it." "It doesn't undo," she said, jaw tight. "It transitions. From us to you," he said. That's what all of this was for, wasn't it? The gala, the photo, the press, the gift. The last word dropped between them like a stone in a lake. Sloane's eyes flicked. Barely. Enough. "You think I'd hurt her? She's pregnant." "I think you'd do whatever you could narrate as leadership," he said, "and I think I helped you believe it." He took a step back, as if he had come to the edge of a roof in fog. "I'm calling Ruiz," he said. "I'm finding Lydia, and I'm going to tell her everything I know." Sloane held his gaze. "You do that, and the board replaces you by morning. Then maybe morning is what I deserve," he said, and left. Sloane closed the door and slid down to the floor. For the first time in years, she thought of the laundromat, the pocketed quarters, the ache of bleach in her hands, her mother's smile too thin to survive. She had sworn she would never be poor again. She hadn't sworn she would never be cruel. The difference is important until it isn't. Detective Ruiz found the cabin. It wasn't the one with the drawer bed. It was a place Nathan had quietly bought during a liquidity event 3 years ago, deeded to a shell company with a name too boring to notice. He had meant it as a surprise for Lydia, he told himself at the time, a retreat for when they needed a place to go quiet. He had never shown her because he was always about to. And then there was another flight, another acquisition, another argument he couldn't face. Ruiz texted Lydia through Ava Grady with an address and a choice. Meet Nathan with counsel, or let him talk to the trees. Lydia chose to meet. Sam insisted on driving. Ava arranged a second car to wait down the road in case everything went wrong. They arrived at dusk. The cabin sat wrapped in pine and fog, a wide porch, windows like patient eyes. Nathan stood on the steps in a coat he didn't have the right to look that young in. Lydia stepped out carefully, one hand under her belly. "You bought a secret," she said. He flinched. "I thought it would be a surprise. Then I thought it would be a refuge. Then I thought I'd missed my chance to tell you anything without hurting you more. And now? Now I think it's evidence," he said, "of who I became when I stopped being the person you could trust." Sam stayed by the car. Ava stood 4 paces back, phone in hand, but recording nothing. This had to be human before it could be legal. They went inside. The cabin was warm from a fire he had lit badly. Lydia sat on the arm of the couch, keeping distance because it helps people tell the truth. Nathan spoke, halting at first, then, with the rhythm of a man emptying a backpack he'd carried for miles. He told her how admiration had become dependence, how Sloane never asked for what she took. She made him offer it so he would believe it was his idea. He told her about the fund, the board, the gifts they groomed for donors. He swore he hadn't planned anything that could harm her. That the gift was meant to steer a narrative, not endanger their child. "You let her write our story," Lydia said, "and she penned me out of it." He nodded, eyes blurring. "I'm sorry," he said simply. Not "I'm sorry if," or "I'm sorry but." "I'm sorry. I forgot that my vows weren't part of a cap table." Lydia felt anger and love tangle into something new, dangerous if mishandled, powerful if shaped. "I want the fund frozen," she said. "I want full transparency. I want the board to know about the box, and I want Sloane nowhere near the clinics." "Done," he said, "whatever it costs me." She studied him. The man she married had always been there, hidden under his fear of failure. Sometimes redemption is not a return. It's a reintroduction. "You'll testify?" Ava asked from the doorway, stepping into the moment like a lighthouse. "Under oath?" Nathan met Lydia's eyes. "I will," he said, "because this time I pick the story I can live with. Please state your name for the record." "Nathan Alexander Hale." "And your current role?" "Founder and Executive Chair, Arcbright Systems." "What is Resilience Fund 2? A vehicle established at the direction of our COO, Sloan Mercer, and myself, to provide liquidity for strategic contingencies." "Did the Hale Foundation, chaired by your wife, transfer funds to vehicles aligned with Resilience Fund 2 without her informed consent?" "Yes." Gasps bloom in a courtroom, the way weather moves over fields, fast, absolute, and ignorant of who's ready. The judge rapped once, not unkindly. Lydia felt the baby turn, as if to find the voice that sounded like home but had not been safe. She sat between Ava and Sam, hands folded, jaw set. Sloan sat behind her counsel, stillness perfected. Her attorney asked clean questions with surgical calm. "Ms. Mercer, did you ever authorize a gift designed to harm Mrs. Hale or her child?" "No," Sloan said, voice even. "I authorized a series of symbolic gifts to highlight program goals. I would never endanger a mother. I was that child once, the one who needed systems to work. Do you know how the rattle came to be tainted with an irritant?" "I do not." Lydia believed that answer. The poison had not been Sloan's. The poison was culture. This casual brutality, dressed in the silk of efficiency. The story that says, if a woman stands in the way of a project, you move her story somewhere softer and call it care. But someone had handled that object with intent. And Ava had found them. The courtroom waited as a man in an ill-fitting suit took the stand, hands shaking. "State your name." "Travis Cole," he whispered. He had been a minor consultant for a PR firm attached to the foundation, a man with little power and less judgment, easily overawed by proximity. "I was told to prepare a gift box for a photo op. I added something to the wood to create a reaction on contact, nothing serious, just to make a scene. I thought it would accelerate decisions." "Who told you to do this?" the prosecutor asked. No one." He stared at his lap. "I thought it would impress Ms. Mercer," he said finally, the words falling like a bad confession into winter air. "She didn't ask for it. I just wanted to be the guy who fixed problems." Sloan didn't blink, but a flash of hurt, real, clean, crossed her face. It was the hurt of being misread by the kind of man who thinks proximity is permission. Lydia felt a complicated mercy unfurl. The world is crueler in men like Travis than in women like Sloan, because chaos plus worship can be deadlier than strategy. The judge recessed. In the hall, reporters made a river. Ava knew how to step around them like stones. She whispered to Lydia, "We'll win the injunction. We'll secure the clinics, the accounting, and the narrative. Then we decide which walls to rebuild and which to leave down." Lydia leaned against a cool marble pillar. Nathan approached with Ruiz at his side. "Thank you," he said. Not as a plea, as a statement. "We're not done," Lydia said. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted you to hear me say it, while the air still smells like court. I will spend the rest of my life earning how you look at me, or I will step aside so you can live without my shadow." She nodded. "Start with the board, then the press, then home," she said, choosing each word carefully, like stones across a stream. The injunction held. Funds froze where they were, and a forensic audit began. Donors were briefed privately with numbers and with Lydia's calm, unadorned voice explaining how transparency is a form of care. She didn't turn herself into a saint. She turned numbers into promises again. And the donors, many of them women who had smiled through nights like hers, began to smile differently. Less performative, more real. Sloane resigned 2 weeks later with a statement that read like a lesson plan. Stewardship requires stepping back when forward motion causes harm. She kept a small piece of stock and a larger piece of dignity. Lydia insisted on that in the negotiations. "You can leave with your name," she told Sloane across a small table, "but not with my work." Sloane blinked, then nodded. "I wish I had learned to be gentler sooner," she said. "It takes longer, but it lasts longer." "Gentleness isn't slow," Lydia said softly. "It's thorough." Nathan moved out of the penthouse and into the cabin for a season that had a first day and no promise of a last. He commuted hard, learned to ask his assistant not for bandwidth, but for boundaries, and went to therapy with a humility that startled the therapist into a small smile. He returned the chairmanship of the foundation to a permanent co-governance model, Lydia, and a rotating independent co-chair. He would be the one doing the reports, the updates, the quiet work of rebuilding trust from task one. The day their son was born, rain feathered the hospital windows, and the city felt almost tender. Nathan stood beside Lydia, not like a guard, but like a student, and cried in the quiet, grateful way that doesn't demand to be seen. They named the baby Jonah, after a story about running and being returned. 3 months later, at a small ceremony in Queens, Lydia cut a ribbon at the new clinic. The ribbon was white, but softer than the one that had cut her hand. She tied a second ribbon to the clinic's mural, a strip from the dress she'd worn the night she disappeared, now stitched into something that caught light. The mothers who'd waited in the rain came in laughing, shaking umbrellas, telling babies who they were about to become. Sloane watched from across the street. She had taken a position with a small rural health non-profit in Indiana that needed someone who understood chaos and how to reduce it without pressing anyone's face into a narrative. She had stopped answering messages from men who loved her for her efficiency. She had started calling her mother again. Detective Ruiz sent a photo from the back of the crowd. Lydia, scissors raised, Jonah on her hip, Nathan clapping like he was learning the motion for the first time. "Sometimes we get the good ending," Ruiz texted. "Don't get used to it. But don't distrust it either." Ava beside Lydia whispered. "You ready for your statement?" Lydia nodded. She kept it simple. "This clinic exists because we remembered a basic truth. Power used to protect the vulnerable multiplies. Power used to protect itself dies on contact. Today, we choose the first kind." The crowd cheered like family. After, while the last cupcake wrappers were swept into a bin and Jonah slept against her chest, Lydia found Sloane across the street. They regarded each other in the cold light 2 women share when they've learned different lessons from the same storm. "Thank you for not destroying me," Sloane said. "I didn't have to," Lydia replied. "You're not my enemy." "And Nathan?" Sloane asked. "He's the father of my child," Lydia said. "He's learning how to be a man who doesn't need forgiveness to feel whole." Sloane smiled, small and honest. "I'll learn too." "We all will," Lydia said. She went back inside, kissed Jonah's forehead, and let the smell of lemon cleanser and new paint fill her throat like hope. In the end, no one got the story they thought they wanted. Lydia didn't get the fairy tale. Nathan didn't get the clean genius. Sloane didn't get the crown. They got something better. A truer kind of life that could hold all the contradictions. The love that failed and learned. The power that hurt and then helped. The ambition that found a different rhythm. Lydia didn't forgive to be noble. She forgave the parts that could be redeemed and replaced the rest with boundaries. Nathan understood at last that integrity isn't a headline but a daily habit. And Sloane, who once built empires out of fear, began building safety out of care. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Lydia's grit, Nathan's reckoning, or Sloane's hard-won humility, please tap like, share it with a friend who needs a good cry and a good ending, and subscribe for more heartfelt, cinematic dramas. Your support helps bring more stories about courage, second chances, and the power of women to the screen. Until the next chapter, take care of your heart, and let it take care of you. He was a king in a glass castle, a man who moved markets with a single word. That night, Liam Crestwood was about to sign a deal worth $10 billion a deal that would secure his legacy forever. The contract was signed, the champagne was poured. But then a voice no louder than a rustle of silk cut through the noise of his victory. A waitress, a woman he hadn't even noticed, leaned in close and whispered fatal words that shattered his world. She said, "The deal is rigged." And in that instant, the king's castle began to crumble as the billionaire's face turned deathly pale. The air in Aurelia, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't have a sign, was thick with the scent of old money and new absorption. It smelled of truffle oil vintage Bordeaux and the silent, ferocious hum of power. At its gravitational center sat Liam Crestwood, a man sculpted from ambition and tailored Italian wool. At 42, he possessed the kind of sharp, predatory handsomeness that made rivals nervous and investors compliant. His empire, Crestwood Capital, was a titan of venture capitalism, and tonight he was closing the largest acquisition of his career. Across the table, Silas Corbin smiled, his teeth a little too white, his charm a little too slick. Silas was the CEO of Viridian Dynamics, the company Liam was about to absorb for the staggering sum of $10 billion. The prize was Viridian's Helios Core technology, a revolutionary form of decentralized energy production that promised to make the global power grid obsolete. It was the future, and Liam was buying it. To the future, Liam, Silas toasted, raising his glass of Chateau Margaux. And to a partnership that will redefine the 21st century. Liam inclined his head, a minimalist gesture that conveyed agreement without betraying enthusiasm. He was a man of control of calculated risks and exhaustive due diligence. His team, led by the sharpest minds from MIT and Stanford, had spent 6 months tearing apart Viridian's data. They'd run every simulation, stress-tested every projection, and vetted every patent. The Helios Core was by all accounts perfect. A flawless diamond. To the future. Liam echoed his voice, a low baritone that commanded attention. The crystal glasses chimed a sound that to him represented the final lock clicking into place. The deal was done. The wire transfers were scheduled for the morning. His chief legal counsel, seated to his right, slid a heavy, leather-bound portfolio across the mahogany table. "Just the final signature, Mr. Crestwood," the lawyer murmured, offering a gold Montblanc pen, like a scepter. Liam took the pen. The weight of it was familiar, comfortable. He uncapped it, the quiet click barely audible over the restaurant's hushed symphony. His eyes scanned the final paragraph, a formality he never skipped. His world was one of details of fine print, where fortunes were won and lost. Everything was in order. He lowered the nib to the signature line, the ink ready to seal his legacy. It was in that suspended moment, a breath held between one epoch of his life and the next, that she appeared. She moved with an efficiency that made her almost invisible, a ghost in a crisp black uniform. Her job was to be unobtrusive, to refill water glasses and clear plates without disturbing the flow of conversation. He had not registered her face, her presence, or anything about her all evening. She was simply part of the room's impeccable service. As she reached to clear away a bread plate beside him, she leaned in her head close to his shoulder. Her proximity was a minor breach of protocol, but he assumed she was about to ask a standard question. Instead, her voice, a quiet, urgent whisper, found its way directly into his ear, bypassing the noise of the celebration. It was a voice that held no deference, only a cold, hard clarity. "Don't sign it," she said. Liam's hand froze an inch above the paper. His focus, once laser-sharp on the contract, fractured. He turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. She wasn't looking at him with the awe or fear he was accustomed to. Her eyes, a startling, intelligent grey, were fixed on his with an unnerving intensity. They held a warning, a plea, and a deep, simmering anger. He felt a flash of irritation. A prank. A stunt by an evil. He was about to dismiss her with a cold glare, to have her removed and fired. But then she spoke again, her lips barely moving, her voice so low it was a vibration more than a sound. "The deal is rigged," she told him quietly. And as the 5 words registered something in their simple, terrifying certainty, bypassed his defenses. It wasn't the accusation itself. He'd heard baseless claims and corporate espionage tactics 100 times. It was the way she said it. The utter lack of doubt. The quiet desperation that spoke not of malice, but of truth. "The Helios core has a fatal flaw. A ghost in the machine," she added, her gaze unwavering. He buried it deep. Ask him about Protocol 0. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she straightened up the bread plate in her hand. To everyone else at the table, it looked like a moment of routine service. Silas was still smiling, his lawyers were chatting amongst themselves. No one else had heard. No one else had seen the exchange. But Liam Crestwood, the man who prided himself on seeing every angle, on anticipating every move, felt a sudden chilling drop in the pit of his stomach. A cold dread, alien and unwelcome, crept up his spine. Protocol 0. The phrase was specific, technical. It wasn't the rambling of a crank. It was a key. He looked at Silas Corbin, whose smile hadn't wavered. But now, filtered through the waitress's warning, Liam saw it differently. The charm seemed predatory, the confidence a little too polished. He looked down at the contract, at his name, waiting to be written. The $10 billion deal. His legacy. A flawless diamond. Or was it a perfect, glittering fake? He slowly, deliberately capped the Mont Blanc pen. The click echoed in the sudden silence of his mind. "Gentlemen," Liam said, his voice perfectly level, betraying none of the chaos erupting within him. "There's a minor detail I'd like to re-verify before we conclude." Across the table, Silas Corbin's smile tightened just a fraction of a degree. It was almost imperceptible, but Liam saw it. And in that moment, the billionaire's face, a mask of confident authority, just seconds before, turned pale. The shift in the room's atmosphere was immediate and seismic, though only 2 men were truly aware of it. To the lawyers and executives, Liam Crestwood's sudden pause was a quirk, a final bout of meticulousness from a famously thorough man. But to Silas Corbin, it was a threat. "A minor detail, Liam," Silas asked, his voice a smooth balm, intended to soothe any hesitation. "My team and yours have been over this with a fine-tooth comb for months. I assure you, every I is dotted." Liam met his gaze, his own expression now an unreadable granite wall. The initial shock had been replaced by a cold, controlled fury. Fury at himself for potentially missing something, and a deeper, more dangerous fury at the possibility of being played for the fool. Nevertheless, Liam said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He slid the portfolio back to his lawyer. My team will reach out to yours in the morning to clarify a technical query. We'll postpone the final signature until then. It was a power move, a declaration that he was still in control. The Crestwood Capital legal team, though confused, nodded in assent. The Viridian executives exchanged uneasy glances. Silas Corbin's mask of affability held, but his eyes had gone cold and hard like chips of ice. The celebratory mood had evaporated, replaced by a tense, unspoken uncertainty. Liam stood. Thank you for the dinner, Silas. I look forward to concluding our business. He offered a handshake that was firm, correct, and utterly devoid of warmth. As he walked away from the table, his security detail falling into step behind him. His mind was a maelstrom. Protocol 0. The phrase echoed a discordant note in the symphony of his success. Who was that woman? How could she possibly know something that his army of analysts had missed? His lead security officer, Ben Carter, a former SAS soldier with a face that looked like it had been carved from a block of wood, opened the door to the armored Maybach. Everything all right, sir? Ben asked, his voice a low rumble. He was one of the few people who could sense the subtle shifts in Liam's demeanor. No, Liam said, sinking into the plush leather. Everything is not all right. He looked back at the restaurant. He had an urge to storm back in, to find the waitress and demand answers. But that would be a public spectacle, a sign of weakness. He needed to be smarter. Ben, Liam said, as the car pulled silently into the rain-slicked New York street. The waitress who served our table tonight, the one with grey eyes, maybe 5'7" brown hair tied back. I need to know who she is. I need to know everything about her, discreetly, and I need the information before sunrise. Consider it done, Ben replied without hesitation. As the Maybach sped through the city, Liam replayed the moment in his head. The whisper, the warning, the name, Protocol 0. It sounded like a failsafe or a self-destruct command. Something hidden. Something buried. He pulled out his phone and made a call to the head of his due diligence team, a tech prodigy named Kenji Tanaka. Kenji, Liam said, his voice sharp. Run a search through all the Viridian data, every file, every line of code, every footnote in the patent filings. I'm looking for a specific term, Protocol 0. I don't care what you have to do. I want an answer in 1 hour. Back in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Liam shed his jacket and tie, pacing the vast minimalist space. The city lights glittered below a kingdom he had built. But for the first time in years, he felt a profound sense of vulnerability. He had built his empire on information, on knowing more than the other guy. Tonight, a complete stranger, a waitress, had slipped through his defenses and told him his entire world was a house of cards. An hour later, Kenji called back, his voice strained. Sir, I've run the search. It's strange. The term Protocol 0 appears nowhere in the primary data, the simulations, or the official documentation. Not once. Liam's jaw tightened. Nowhere are you certain. Positive. It's as if the term doesn't exist in their universe, Kenji said. But I found something. In the deep archive of the server data we mirrored, there are fragments, deleted log files, overwritten code snippets. In a few of those corrupted fragments, the string PZ appears. It's always associated with catastrophic failure simulations. Every time the Helios core model goes critical in these old buried tests, The PZ string is in the event log right before the system flatlines. But the files are heavily corrupted. It's like someone tried to digitally shred them. He buried it deep. The waitress's words. A chill ran down Liam's spine. It was real. Something was there. Just then his secure messaging app chimed. It was Ben. The message contained a single file. Liam opened it. It was a dossier. The waitress's name was Chloe Sterling. The file contained a recent photo, her address in a modest Queens neighborhood, her employment history. She was a temp working for a high-end hospitality agency. On the surface, she was nobody. Just another face in the city's anonymous workforce. But Ben had dug deeper. He had found her family history. And that's when Liam Crestwood's blood ran cold. Chloe Sterling was the only daughter of Dr. Alistair Sterling, a brilliant but obscure physicist who had died 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. The report noted that Dr. Sterling was the co-founder of a small tech startup 30 years ago, a company that specialized in theoretical energy research. The name of that company was Viridian Dynamics, and his original partner, the man who bought him out for a pittance just before the company started developing its core technology, was Silas Corbin. Liam stared at the screen, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't a random act. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was personal. He looked at Chloe Sterling's photo again. The same intelligent, intense grey eyes stared back at him. They were the eyes of a woman who had lost everything. The eyes of a woman seeking not just to warn him, but to find justice. As he reached for his coat, he noticed something he'd missed. In his haste to leave the restaurant, he'd pocketed the cloth napkin from his place setting. As he pulled it out, a small folded piece of paper fell from its folds. It was a corner of an order slip torn from a notepad. On it, written in neat, precise script, was a single line of alphanumeric code and a short message. ILFH 387Z4. The original key. He won't have changed it. It's the only thing of my father's he was ever afraid of. Liam now had a name, a motive and a key. The hunt had begun. He buzzed Ben Carter on the intercom. "Ready the car," he said, his voice like ice. "We're going to Queens." The address in Queens led them to a 5-story walk-up, a pre-war brick building with tired-looking fire escapes clinging to its facade. It was a world away from Liam's polished Manhattan existence. The air here was a mix of street food and damp pavement. This was a place of survival, not victory. "You want me to go up, sir?" Ben asked, parking the inconspicuous sedan across the street. "No, I'll go myself," Liam said, stepping out of the car. "Wait here. Keep the engine running." He needed to do this alone. A man like him arriving with security would look like intimidation. He needed answers, and he sensed that Chloe Sterling would only give them if he came to her on her own terms, as a man seeking truth, not as a billionaire demanding it. He found apartment 4B and knocked. The door was old, the paint chipped. For a long moment, there was no answer. He was about to knock again when he heard the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. In the sliver of space, he saw one of Chloe's grey eyes, wary and assessing. "Mr. Crestwood," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was as calm and steady as it had been in the restaurant. "Miss Sterling," he replied, his tone formal. "May I come in?" "I believe we have something to discuss." She studied him for another 10 seconds, her gaze sweeping over him, judging his intentions. Finally, she closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. "I have about 15 minutes before my next shift," she said, stepping aside. The apartment was small, meticulously clean, and sparsely furnished. The main room served as a living room, dining room, and office. One wall was dominated not by a television, but by a massive corkboard covered in a chaotic web of notes, diagrams, photographs, and printouts, all connected by colored string. It was the kind of evidence board a detective would build for an unsolved case. At its center was a faded photograph of a kind-faced, bespectacled man standing proudly next to a much younger Silas Corbin. "That's my father, Dr. Alistair Sterling," Chloe said, following his gaze. "And that is the man who destroyed him." She gestured towards a small, worn table with 2 chairs. "Tea?" "No, thank you," Liam said, remaining standing. He held up the piece of napkin. "You gave me this. ALFH 387Z4. You called it a key." "It's a master access key," she explained, her arms crossed. "My father designed the original server architecture for Viridian. He built back doors into everything. It was his intellectual property. He felt he had a right to be able to access his own work. That key is for the legacy archive server, the one they think is decommissioned but is actually air-gapped in their sub-basement data center. It's where they dump old raw data they're legally required to keep but don't want anyone to see. It's where he would have hidden his tracks." Liam's mind raced. An air-gapped server. A physical breach would be necessary. "And Protocol 0. Chloe walked over to the corkboard. "My father was a genius, Mr. Crestwood. But he was also a cautious man. He trusted Silas Corbin, but he didn't trust the kind of people Silas was starting to bring in as investors. People who cared only about profit, not safety. The Helios core is based on a delicate quantum reaction. It's stable 99.99% of the time. But my father discovered an anomaly, a rare set of energy input conditions that could cause a cascading failure in the containment field." She tapped a complex equation scrawled on an index card. "The reaction wouldn't just stop. It would reverse. For a fraction of a second, it would draw an immense amount of energy from its immediate surroundings, causing a catastrophic implosion. Not a bomb, but a vacuum. A silent, destructive void. Anything within a 100-meter radius would be crushed instantly." Liam felt a visceral chill. The Helios core units were designed for residential and commercial districts. One failing would be a localized disaster, a citywide rollout. The consequences were unthinkable. "He called this vulnerability Protocol 0. Chloe continued, her voice tight with remembered pain. It was his term for the absolute fail state. He was developing a software patch, a governor that would prevent the core from ever reaching the required input conditions. But Silas saw it as a delay, an unnecessary expense. He argued that the conditions were so statistically improbable they'd never occur. "But they could occur," Liam stated, understanding dawning. "They could," she confirmed, "and my father refused to let the technology go to market without the patch. That was their final argument. A week later, Silas called an emergency board meeting when my father was out of town. He used my father's unwillingness to move forward and his obsessive focus on edge cases to paint him as an obstacle. He engineered a vote and pushed him out of the company he helped build." She finally looked at him, her eyes glistening. They gave him a check that was an insult and a non-disclosure agreement that was a gag order. Silas took all of my father's research, all of it. My father spent the next 25 years fighting them in court. But Silas had better lawyers and deeper pockets. The stress, the injustice of it all, it killed him. He died at his desk trying to find a way to warn the world. She took a deep breath, composing herself. For 5 years, I've been trying to find proof. I knew he kept meticulous records. I took this job because the agency sometimes staffs events at Viridian's corporate headquarters and at restaurants like Aurelia, where their executives meet. I've been listening, watching, waiting for a chance. When I heard your deal was closing, I knew I was out of time. Liam was silent, processing the enormity of her story. This wasn't just a rigged deal. It was a conspiracy, decades in the making, built on a foundation of betrayal and a potentially catastrophic lie. Why warn me? Liam finally asked. Why not go to the press? Because the press would want undeniable proof, which I don't have, without getting into that server, she said bluntly. They'd print Silas's denials and he'd bury the story with his PR machine. He'd paint me as the disgruntled daughter of a failed scientist. But you have the resources to get that proof. You were about to give him $10 billion. Right now, you are the only person on Earth with more leverage over Silas Corbin than he has over you. You're the only one who can stop him. He looked from the board, a testament to one woman's obsessive quest for justice, to her face etched with a strength that belied her simple uniform. He had come here expecting to interrogate a source. He was leaving with a mission. This was no longer just about his money or his reputation. It was about a legacy, not his, but Dr. Alistair Sterling's. The server, Liam said, his voice low and determined. Where is it? Their headquarters. Downtown, Chloe replied. Sub-level 3. The room is shielded, no wireless access in or out. Physical access only. Liam nodded slowly. His mind was already formulating a plan, a series of moves and counter-moves. It was an impossible challenge, a fortress to be breached. But Liam Crestwood had not built his empire by backing down from the impossible. Ms. Sterling, he said, his gaze meeting hers. Your next shift. Cancel it. As of this moment, you work for me. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled chaos, orchestrated from Liam's penthouse, which had been transformed into a high-tech command center. Whiteboards replaced priceless art, and encrypted laptops covered the polished surfaces. The air crackled with the energy of a brewing storm. Liam knew he couldn't use his own people for this. Crestwood Capital's employees were analysts and lawyers, not covert operatives. A breach of Viridian dynamics had to be untraceable, executed by professionals who existed in the shadows. He needed ghosts. His first call was to a man known only as Spectre. Liam had used him once before, years ago, to handle a delicate case of industrial espionage. Spectre was a digital phantom, one of the world's most formidable ethical hackers. He specialized in penetrating secure networks, not for destruction, but for information. They met not in person, but in a heavily encrypted virtual conference room that Spectre had built himself. His avatar was a simple grey silhouette. It's been a while, Crestwood, Spectre's synthesized voice crackled. I assume you're not calling to discuss the weather. I need you to map a network, Liam said, getting straight to the point. Viridian Dynamics headquarters. I need to know every camera, every motion sensor, every keypad, every digital heartbeat inside that building. I need to know their security patrol schedules and the vulnerabilities in their system. And I need it yesterday. Viridian, Spectre mused. That's a top-tier system. Pricey. You're not asking me to knock on the door. You're asking me to dismantle a fortress. I'm aware, Liam said. The compensation will reflect the difficulty. There was a pause. Send me the preliminary data you have. I'll take a look. If it's doable, my price is non-negotiable. The second piece of the puzzle was physical. For that, Liam relied on Ben Carter. "Ben," he said, pointing to a blueprint of the Viridian Tower laid out on his table. "I need someone who can walk through walls. Someone who knows alarm systems, pressure plates, and magnetic locks like they're a second language." Ben nodded, his expression unchanging. "I know a guy. Name's Julian Pines. Used to do acquisitions for a different kind of company. Specialized in item retrieval from uncooperative collections. He's retired, but he listens when I call." "Get him," Liam ordered. While Ben made the call, Liam turned his attention to Chloe. She was no longer a waitress. She was the mission's chief intelligence officer. Seated at a terminal, she navigated through a digital archive of her father's old research notes, which she had painstakingly scanned and preserved over the years. "Silas is arrogant, but he's also lazy," she explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He wouldn't have reinvented the wheel. The foundation of the current network security will still be based on my father's original architecture. He'll have added layers, of course, but the bones will be the same." She brought up a diagram, a complex flowchart of protocols and firewalls. "My father had a philosophical belief in redundancies. He always built in 3 layers of everything. Silas will have fortified the outer 2, but he may have neglected the 3rd innermost layer, assuming no one could ever get that far." Over the next day, the team took shape. Julian Pines, a wiry, restless man in his late 50s, with nimble fingers and the perpetually alert eyes of a cat, arrived and immediately began studying the building's schematics. Spectre sent back his initial probe results, a comprehensive map of Viridian's digital defenses, highlighting a potential blind spot in the camera coverage of a maintenance corridor on sub-level 2, lasting for exactly 93 seconds, every 3 hours, during a system diagnostic cycle. The plan coalesced around that 93-second window. It was audacious and timed to the millisecond. Phase 1 belonged to Spectre. He would launch a sophisticated phishing attack aimed at a single mid-level IT employee at Viridian, creating a temporary security credential. This credential wouldn't grant access to anything important, but it would allow them to enter the building after hours under the guise of a routine systems check. Phase 2 was Julian. Using the stolen credential, he and Ben would gain access to the building. They would navigate to the sub-level 2 maintenance corridor. During Spectre's 93-second camera blind spot, Julian would have to bypass a laser grid and a pressure-sensitive floor to access a hard-wired terminal that controlled the environmental systems for the server rooms below. Phase 3 was Chloe's contribution. From that terminal, they would upload a code she had written based on her father's notes. The code wouldn't shut down security. Instead, it would trigger a false overheating alert in a non-critical server rack in a different section of the sublevel. This would automatically redirect the on-site security patrol to the false alarm, giving them a clear 10-minute window. Phase 4 was the final breach. During those 10 minutes, Julian would have to crack the physical lock on the legacy archive room. It was an old-school tumbler lock, a relic of her father's time, but one Julian assured them was a nostalgic work of art he could handle. Once inside, Ben would use the key Chloe had provided, ALFH 387Z4, to access the air-gapped server directly with Spectre, guiding him via a secure audio link on how to mirror the drive's contents onto a shielded external device. "It's insane," Julian muttered, tracing a route on the blueprints with his finger. "Too many variables. If any one of us is off by a second, the whole thing comes down." "It's the only way," Liam said, his voice a steely anchor in the room's tense energy. Silas closes the secondary funding round in 72 hours. Once that money is in, he'll have enough capital to weather any scandal. We have to get that proof before then. Chloe looked up from her screen. There's one more thing. The server is protected by a final fail-safe my father called the Sterling cipher. If you enter the wrong master password more than twice, it initiates a data wipe protocol. The drive will be magnetically scoured clean in less than 10 seconds. And the password is? Liam asked. Chloe shook her head. I don't know. He never wrote it down. He said it was something that only he would know. Something personal. A new formidable obstacle. They could get all the way to the goal line, only to be stopped by an unsolvable riddle. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Liam said, though a knot of unease tightened in his gut. Spectre. Are you ready? Ready to knock? The synthesized voice replied. Julian Ben. Both men gave a curt nod. Chloe, Liam said, turning to her. You will be here with me, guiding them. You know the system better than anyone. She nodded, her face pale but determined. Her entire life, her entire quest for justice for her father, had led to this single night. As the team prepared to deploy, Liam stood by the window looking out at the city. He was risking everything, his money, his freedom, his reputation on the word of a waitress and a team of ghosts, all to expose a flaw in a deal he had once considered his masterpiece. It was a gamble that defied all logic. But as he thought of Chloe's story, of Alistair Sterling's stolen legacy, he knew it was the only move he could make. The night of the operation descended upon the city with a cold, unforgiving rain that slicked the streets and blurred the neon lights into a watercolor haze. Inside Liam's penthouse, the silence was absolute, broken only by the quiet hum of electronics and the rhythmic drumming of rain against the panoramic windows. It was 2:00 a.m. Showtime. Spectre status, Liam said into his headset, his eyes fixed on a multi-panel display showing security camera feeds Spectre had discreetly looped. The lure is in the water. Spectre's voice replied, cool and detached. Target acquired. A junior sysadmin named Philip, likes online poker and has a weakness for emails promising free tech gadgets. He's about to become our new best friend. On one screen, a mock email appeared impeccably designed to look like an internal IT bulletin announcing a mandatory security update. A few tense seconds passed. Then a small icon on Spectre's display flashed green. He clicked. We're in, Spectre announced. I'm cloning his low-level access card now. The credentials are being transmitted to Ben's device. Miles away in a nondescript van, parked a block from the Viridian Tower, Ben Carter watched a progress bar on a small, sophisticated card writer fill up. A blank white card was fed into the machine, and moments later it emerged as a perfect replica of the sysadmin's ID. Credentials received, Ben confirmed. We're moving. He and Julian Pines exited the van clad in dark work uniforms with a generic Network Solutions logo stitched on the chest. They looked like any other after-hours contractors, blending seamlessly into the city's nocturnal rhythm. You look nervous for a guy who used to do this for a living, Ben rumbled as they approached the building's side entrance. Nervous is what keeps you from getting sloppy, Julian retorted, his fingers flexing. Cocky is what gets you a 10-year stay in a concrete box. They swiped the card. The light on the reader turned green. A quiet click and the door opened. They were inside the belly of the beast. Back in the command center, Chloe's voice was a steady presence in their ears. Lobby cameras are on a 30-second loop for the next 5 minutes, courtesy of Spectre. Head left past the reception desk. The stairwell door is your third on the right. Guided by her intimate knowledge of her father's designs and Spectre's real-time digital surveillance, the two men moved like spectres through the deserted echoing halls of the corporate giant. They descended 3 flights of stairs, the air growing cooler and smelling of conditioned air and ozone. They reached the maintenance corridor on sublevel 2. "Okay, this is the tricky part," Julian whispered into his mic, peering around the corner. A web of red laser beams crisscrossed the hallway, impossibly dense. "Standard Class 3 grid. You sneeze too hard, and the whole building goes into lockdown. The diagnostic cycle begins in 2 minutes," Spectre's voice cut in. "The grid will go down, but the pressure plates under the floor will remain active. Julian, it's your stage." "Just give me my cue," Julian said, pulling a small, thin metal probe from his kit. Liam watched on a monitor, displaying a schematic of the corridor. 2 dots representing Ben and Julian were poised at the edge of a red-hatched danger zone. His hands were clenched into fists. He was a man accustomed to controlling outcomes from a boardroom, moving assets like chess pieces. Now he was a helpless observer, his fate in the hands of others. "Diagnostic cycle initiating in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spectre counted down. "The grid is down. You have 93 seconds. Go!" As the red lasers vanished, Julian sprang into action. He didn't step onto the floor. Instead, he lay on his stomach, using the probe to feel for the edges of the pressure plates under the industrial tile. He moved with a strange, spider-like grace, his body distributing its weight with preternatural skill. It was a painstaking, agonizingly slow process. 30 seconds remaining, Chloe said, her voice strained. "Almost there." Julian grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. He was halfway across. Ben stood guard, a silent, imposing statue. 15 seconds. Julian reached the other side, his hand slapping the wall inches from the hard-wired terminal. He pulled himself up his feet, carefully, finding the safe zones he had identified. 10 seconds, Julian. You have to get clear. He jacked a cable from his wrist-mounted device into the terminal. Uploading Chloe's code now. 5, 4. The upload bar hit 100%. Julian ripped the cable out. 3, 2. He scrambled back across the floor, foregoing finesse for speed, knowing the lasers were about to reappear. He hurled himself the last few feet, rolling into the safe corridor beside Ben, just as Spectre said, 1. The laser grid snapped back into existence with a faint electronic hum. They had made it, with less than a second to spare. A moment later, a new alert flashed on Spectre's screen. "It worked," he announced, a hint of admiration in his voice. "False alarm triggered. Overheating sensor in server room 7B. 2 guards are on the move." He brought up the camera feed, showing 2 security guards jogging down a distant hallway away from their target. "You have your 10-minute window," Spectre said. "The clock is ticking." Ben and Julian moved swiftly down another flight of stairs to the legacy archive room. The door was heavy steel with no electronic keypad, only a formidable-looking high-security mechanical lock. "My turn," Julian said, a grin finally touching his lips. He produced a set of tension wrenches and picks from his kit. They don't make them like this anymore. A Medeco biaxial. Beautiful. He inserted the tools, his head pressed against the cold steel of the door, listening to the faint clicks of the tumblers. The seconds ticked by. 1 minute, 2, 3. "How are we doing, Julian?" Liam asked, his voice tight. "Patience," Julian murmured. "This is a conversation, not an argument. She's telling me her secrets." Click, click, clack, click. Suddenly he went still. He turned the tension wrench. A loud, satisfying thunk echoed in the quiet corridor. Julian stepped back from the door and gave it a slight push. It swung inward, revealing a dark, cavernous room, filled with towering racks of old magnetic tape reels and dormant server towers. "We are in," Ben reported, his voice flat, but carrying the weight of their victory. He stepped into the room, a powerful flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Chloe, where do we find it?" "Back left corner," she directed. It should be an isolated rack labeled SAR, Sterling Archive Repository. My father had a flair for the dramatic. Ben located the rack. A single black server sat there humming faintly. It was ancient by modern standards, but it was the heart of their entire operation. He connected the shielded drive. "Okay, I'm at the terminal," Ben said. "It's asking for the password, the Sterling cipher." A hush fell over the command center. They had reached the final bridge. "Chloe?" Liam asked softly. She was staring at the screen, her face a mask of concentration. "Something personal. Something only he would know," she whispered to herself, her mind racing through years of memories. His favorite book. His pet's name. My mother's birthday. "We only have 2 shots at this," Ben reminded them. 5 minutes left in our window." Chloe closed her eyes, trying to think like her father. He wasn't a sentimental man in that way. His passwords were always based on logic, on science. A tribute to his heroes. Einstein, Feynman, Hawley. No too simple. Then an image flashed in her mind. Her father, years ago, sitting at their kitchen table, sketching on a napkin. She, a young girl, had asked him what he was doing. "I'm trying to solve the universe, sweetie," he had said with a sad smile. "But I think I'm missing the most important variable." Her eyes snapped open. "Ben?" she said, her voice trembling with a sudden certain insight. "Try this. It's case sensitive. Capital E equals lowercase m c squared. But don't use the number 2. Use the word squared. EM is squared." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Liam held his breath. "Access denied." Ben's voice came back, a hammer blow in the quiet room. "1 attempt remaining." Chloe's heart sank. She was wrong. All this for nothing. The memory was so clear, but maybe she had misunderstood. Despair began to creep in. "The most important variable," she whispered the words catching in her throat. Liam watched her, seeing her hope begin to crumble. He thought back to the corkboard in her apartment, a shrine to her father's memory. He thought about the man she described, brilliant, betrayed, but above all, a father who loved his daughter. "Chloe," Liam said, suddenly, his voice sharp and clear. "You said he was missing a variable. What if it wasn't a scientific one? What if you were the variable?" Chloe looked at him confused. "Think about the equation," Liam pressed. "He was talking to you. What's your name?" "Chloe, what does it stand for?" Her full name. "Chloe Marie Sterling." "CMS." She breathed, her eyes widening in realization. "ESMC. Squared," Liam finished. "Try that. E-Sacker CMS squared." It was a wild guess, a leap of faith based on nothing more than a father's love. "Ben, do it," Chloe said, her voice filled with renewed hope. "Capital E equals capital C, capital M, capital S, and the number 2 for squared." Again the agonizing silence. The progress bar for the 10-minute window was almost full. Then Ben's voice came through, filled with a rare note of triumph. "Access granted. I'm in, mirroring the drive now." With the adrenaline of the heist fading with the morning light, the true work began. The specialists, Julian and Spectre, had vanished back into the shadows from which they came, leaving Liam, Chloe, and Ben in the silent penthouse. The shielded drive, the prize from their impossible raid, was connected to a secure offline laptop. It was a digital tomb, and they were about to unearth its secrets. Chloe took the lead, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The file structure was a maze of encrypted folders, but a single unlocked text file sat in the root directory. It was named README and contained a simple cryptic phrase. "The key is the question I could never answer." A sad smile touched Chloe's lips. "I know this," she whispered. It was a question her father had often muttered in despair during his long, futile legal battles. She typed the decryption key. "What is the half-life of a lie?" Instantly, the drive's contents unlocked. For hours, they delved into the digital ghost of Dr. Alistair Sterling. They found his original time-stamped designs for the Helios core, proving his ownership of the intellectual property. They watched video logs of a brilliant man, his face slowly etched with worry as he spoke of his partner's recklessness. Then they found the folder that would change everything PZ. Inside was the truth, raw and terrifying. It contained a complete simulation model of the Helios core, far more advanced than anything Viridian had disclosed. Following her father's notes, Chloe input a specific sequence of energy fluctuations. He called it a harmonic resonance cascade. She explained, her voice tense. A 1 in a billion chance, according to Solas. On screen, the core's model turned a deep, warning red. A black sphere of influence erupted from its center, and the simulation showed a city block being crushed into nothingness by a silent, catastrophic implosion. The log file was explicit: containment field failure. Protocol 0 engaged. "He knew," Liam breathed, staring at the screen. Silas knew this could happen. The proof was in the next file, an audio recording. They listened to the chillingly casual conversation between the two partners from decades ago. Alistair's voice was firm, pleading for caution and for the flaw to be fixed. Silas Corbin's reply was cold and dismissive. "The risk is acceptable, Alistair," he'd said. "You're an obstacle to progress." It was the smoking gun, irrefutable proof of a willful criminal deception. But the final file was the most devastating. It was a video log of Alistair, recorded just after he was ousted from his own company. He looked broken, but his eyes burned with a cold fire. "If you are seeing this," he began, "it means Silas has pushed ahead, knowing the danger. He has built his empire on a time bomb. I have failed to stop him through conventional means, so I was forced to create my own." He explained that Protocol 0 was no longer just a flaw. He had turned it into a weapon. "I designed a remote activation key." Alistair confessed, his voice heavy with the weight of his creation. "It can send a signal to the entire Helios core network, forcing the harmonic cascade. It will trigger Protocol 0 everywhere, all at once. It is a weapon of mutually assured destruction to be used only as a last resort to prove the danger is real." He looked directly into the camera, a ghost speaking across time. "May God forgive me, but the activation key is embedded within the source code of this very video file." The video ended, plunging the room into a stunned silence. They had not just found proof to expose a fraud. Alistair Sterling, in his desperation, had given them a doomsday trigger. The leverage they now possessed was absolute, but it was terrifyingly dangerous. They held the power not only to ruin Silas Corbin, but to hold his entire legacy hostage with the threat of unimaginable catastrophe. The air in the Crestwood Capital boardroom was glacial. It was 24 hours after the heist, and Liam had summoned Silas Corbin for a final private meeting. No lawyers, no executives, just the two of them. Silas entered with a confident stride, his smile firmly back in place. He clearly believed Liam's minor detail had been resolved and that he was here to receive an apology and a signature. "Liam," he began, extending a hand, "I hope your team's late-night paranoia has been satisfied. Shall we get this deal back on track?" Liam didn't take his hand. He gestured to the chair opposite him at the long obsidian table. "Sit down, Silas." The command was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Silas's smile falter. He sat, his posture stiffening. "There will be no deal," Liam said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Not now, not ever." Silas laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "What is this? Some kind of last-minute power play to renegotiate the price? It's a bit transparent even for you." "This isn't about the price," Liam replied. He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a single image, a faded photograph of a young Alistair Sterling and an even younger Silas Corbin standing proudly in front of a whiteboard covered in equations. Silas stared at the photo, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear appeared in his eyes. He looked up at Liam, his face pale. "I don't know what you think, I've been to the Sterling Archive repository." "Silas," Liam cut him off, his voice like chipping ice. "I've seen Alistair's logs. I've seen his original designs. And I've seen the full unredacted simulation for Protocol Zero." The name hit Silas like a physical blow. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy grey pallor. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked for the first time in his life, utterly and completely defeated. "He told you," Silas whispered, his voice hoarse. "That crazy old man. He warned you." "He didn't have to," Liam said, leaning forward. "His data speaks for itself. The flaw is real. You knew about it. You buried it and built an empire on a lie that could kill thousands of people." Silas slumped back in his chair, the fight gone from him. "It was a 1 in a billion chance," he muttered, repeating the same tired excuse from the audio log. "The risk was acceptable." "Acceptable to you, perhaps," Liam shot back, "but not to me, and not to the people whose lives you were willing to gamble with." He let the silence hang in the air for a moment, letting Silas drown in it. Then he delivered the final devastating blow. Alistair didn't just leave behind his research, Silas. He left a fail-safe, a remote activation key, a way to trigger Protocol Zero across every Helios core unit simultaneously, his last resort. And I have it. If Silas had been pale before he was now ashen, the implication was clear. Liam didn't just have the power to expose him. He held a kill switch that could turn his entire life's work into a global catastrophe. It was the ultimate checkmate. "What do you want?" Silas asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Money." "You already have all the money in the world." "This isn't about money anymore," Liam said, standing up and walking to the window, his back to Silas. "This is about justice and legacy." He turned back to face him. "Here is what is going to happen. You are going to walk away from Viridian Dynamics. You will issue a public statement citing personal health reasons for your immediate retirement. You will transfer your entire share portfolio, every single stock, into a trust. A trust that I will control. Silas stared at him aghast. You're going to take my company? No, Liam corrected him. I'm going to save it. The trust's first act will be to fund a new R&D division. Its sole purpose will be to fix the Protocol Zero flaw, to implement the governor that Alistair Sterling designed 30 years ago. We will make the Helios core safe. We will make it what it was always supposed to be. He paused, letting the terms sink in. The head of that new division and the primary beneficiary of the trust, Liam continued, will be its rightful heir, Chloe Sterling. Silas looked as though he might be physically sick. The idea of Alistair's daughter inheriting the empire he had stolen was an irony so bitter it was poison. You can't, Silas stammered. The board, the shareholders will be thrilled to learn that Crestwood Capital is stepping in to oversee a massive technological refit that will make their investment infinitely more secure, Liam said coldly. As for the board, they will fall in line when I present them with a redacted version of my findings. They can either accept these terms or I can release the full data package to every major news outlet and regulatory agency on the planet. Your call. It wasn't a choice. It was an execution. Silas Corbin, the titan of industry, was broken. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and stripped of everything he had built. And you? Silas asked, a flicker of defiance in his voice. What do you get out of this? You're sinking billions into fixing a company you're not even acquiring. Liam walked back to the table and looked down at the defeated man. What do I get? I get to sleep at night, he said simply. Now get out of my building. My lawyers will be in touch. Silas Corbin didn't say another word. He stood on shaky legs and walked out of the boardroom, a ghost leaving his own life behind. Later that day, Liam met Chloe in a small, quiet park downtown. The rain had stopped, and the city was washed clean. He handed her a portfolio containing the charter for the new trust and the R&D division. It's all there, he said. The Alistair Sterling Foundation. You're in control. You have the funding, the resources, everything you need to finish your father's work. Chloe took the portfolio, her hands trembling slightly. She looked at him, her grey eyes clear and filled with a profound gratitude that was more powerful than any words. Why? She asked the same question Silas had posed. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have just walked away from the deal. Liam thought for a moment, looking at the city skyline. My whole life has been about acquisition, he said, his voice thoughtful. Buying things. Companies, technologies, influence. I was about to pay $10 billion for a legacy. But you showed me that a true legacy isn't something you buy. It's something you build. Or in this case, something you help rebuild. He turned to her. Your father was a great man, Chloe. It's time the world knew it. A single tear traced a path down Chloe's cheek, but she was smiling. It was a smile of relief, of justice, of a future her father had only dreamed of. The deal may have been rigged, but in the end, justice had found a way to balance the books. Liam Crestwood hadn't closed the biggest deal of his career. He had just made the best investment of his life. In the end, it wasn't about the $10 billion. It wasn't about the power or the prestige. It was about a quiet whisper in a loud room, a warning that forced a billionaire to look past the balance sheets and see the truth. Liam Crestwood thought he was buying the future, but Chloe Sterling taught him that he had a responsibility to fix the past. Together, they turned a story of betrayal into a legacy of innovation and justice, proving that sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one signing the check, but the one brave enough to speak the truth. What did you think of Liam's final move? Was it justice, or was it the ultimate corporate takeover? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of intrigue and redemption, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who loves a good twist, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove real life is more dramatic than fiction.